The town of Deadwood had a way of swallowing souls and spitting out ghosts. Dust rolled through the crooked streets like it owned the place, weaving between worn-out boots and bloodstains that never quite faded. Men came here chasing gold, but most found something darker instead. Greed ruled. Fear enforced it. And at the center of it all stood the Black Vultures. They weren't just a gang. They were a sickness. Ruthless, untouchable, and led by a man whose name alone made grown men lower their eyes, Silas Crow. That morning, the town gathered in uneasy silence. Not because they wanted to, but because they were forced to. In the middle of the street, tied to a wooden post, stood a young woman. Her dress was torn. Her face bruised. But her eyes still burned with defiance. Her name was Clara Whitmore. And today, she was being made an example. Silas Crow stepped forward slowly, his boots crunching against the dirt. He wore a long black coat, his silver revolver gleaming at his side like it thirsted for attention. "You see this?" he called out, turning to the crowd. "This is what happens when someone thinks they can steal from me." Clara spat blood onto the ground. "I didn't steal anything," she said, her voice shaking but unbroken. Silas smiled. "Oh, but you did," he replied softly. "You stole something far more valuable than gold, respect." He raised his hand, and one of his men stepped forward, cracking a whip in the air. The sound echoed like thunder. The crowd flinched. But no one moved. No one ever moved. Because in Deadwood, survival meant silence. The whip came down. Clara screamed. And still, no one stepped forward. Until a voice cut through the air. Calm. Cold. Unafraid. "Release her." Everything stopped. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Silas turned slowly. Standing at the edge of the street was a man no one had seen before. Dust-covered coat. Hat pulled low. A revolver resting at his side like it belonged there more than his own hand. No badge. No name. Just a presence that didn't belong in a place like Deadwood. Silas narrowed his eyes. "You lost, stranger?" he asked. The man took a step forward. "I said," he repeated, his voice steady as steel, "release her." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't bravery. This was suicide. Silas chuckled. "You must be new here," he said. "People don't give me orders." The stranger stopped a few feet away. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, "I'm not people." Silence. A dangerous kind. Silas's smile faded. "Well then," he said, his hand drifting toward his gun, "what exactly are you?" The stranger lifted his head slightly. And for the first time, his eyes were visible. Cold. Empty. Like a man who had already died once, and wasn't afraid to do it again. "The last mistake you'll ever make." The street exploded. Gunfire cracked like lightning. Silas's men drew first, but the stranger was faster. 2 shots. 2 bodies hit the dirt. Before the echo faded, he moved again, smooth, precise, deadly. Another man fell. Then another. Panic spread. The Black Vultures weren't used to resistance. Certainly not like this. Silas fired, but the stranger stepped aside like he'd seen it coming before it happened. In seconds, it was over. 6 men lay in the dirt. The crowd stood frozen. Silas remained. Breathing hard. Eyes wide. For the first time in years, fear touched his face. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. The stranger didn't answer. He walked past him. Cut the rope binding Clara's hands. She collapsed, but he caught her before she hit the ground. "You're safe," he said quietly. Silas laughed bitterly. "You think this ends here?" he said. You just signed your death warrant. The stranger turned slightly. I've been dead a long time, he replied. And then he walked away, leaving behind a broken gang, and a town that would never be the same again. Deadwood didn't sleep that night. Whispers filled every corner. Some said the stranger was a bounty hunter. Others claimed he was a ghost. But one thing was certain. Silas Crow wasn't finished. And everyone knew what that meant. Blood. More than before. Inside an abandoned cabin at the edge of town, Clara sat by the fire, her hands wrapped in cloth. The stranger stood near the window, watching the darkness. You should leave, she said softly. Before it's too late. He didn't move. It already is, he replied. She studied him. You didn't have to help me, she said. Why did you? For a moment, there was only silence. Then. Because no one helped her. Clara frowned. Who? He didn't answer. But something in his eyes shifted. Pain. Old. Buried. But not gone. They took everything from me once, he said quietly. I don't let that happen again. Before Clara could speak. A gunshot shattered the night. The window exploded inward. The stranger moved instantly, pulling her down as bullets tore through the cabin walls. They found us, she whispered. No, he said calmly. They followed me. Outside, torches flickered. Voices shouted. Dozens this time. Silas had brought everyone. This ends now. Silas's voice roared from the darkness. The stranger stood. Checked his revolver. Then looked at Clara. There's a back door, he said. Take the horse and ride north. Don't stop. I'm not leaving you, she said. You are, he replied firmly. She shook her head. You'll die. He gave a faint, almost invisible smile. That's the idea. Before she could argue, he stepped outside. Alone. The night fell silent again. Silas stood at the front of a small army. You should have kept walking, he said. The stranger tilted his head slightly. You should have listened. And then. Chaos. Gunfire lit up the night like a storm. The stranger moved like death itself. Precise. Relentless. Unstoppable. Men fell one after another. But there were too many. Even for him. A bullet tore through his shoulder. Another grazed his side. Still, he didn't stop. Because this wasn't about survival. It was about ending something. Finally. Only Silas remained. The two men stood facing each other. Breathing hard. Bleeding. This town belongs to me, Silas growled. The stranger raised his gun. Not anymore. 2 shots. 1 echo. Silas fell. The nightmare ended. The stranger stood there for a moment longer. Then. He collapsed. At sunrise, the town gathered again. But this time, something was different. There was no fear. Only silence. And respect. Clara stood beside him, tears in her eyes. Who was he? Someone asked. She looked at the man who had saved her, and changed everything. A man who refused to look away, she said. They buried him on a hill overlooking Deadwood. No name. No past. Just a legacy. And from that day on, Deadwood was never the same.